Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Listen to My Neighbours Making a Dreadful Noise. Oh, sorry, Listen with Vobes. I am driven mad, I tell you, with my wretched neighbours who've not stopped doing something to their floorboards for the last few days. It's just been on and on. It's driving me up the wall. Shut up! Don't they realise somebody is trying to broadcast to the world in this back room here in Worthing, in West Sussex, to the edge of the South Downs and the foot of the English Channel? Don't they realise that we are reading Neighbourhood by Tickner Edwards? Have they no concept of the amount of excited people who are on the edge of their seats waiting to hear what other wonderful phrases are going to tip out of Tickner Edwards' mouth and be written onto the page? Who knows? Certainly they don't give a monkeys. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Listen with Vobes. And I'm sorry, we've got to put up with this din that is going on, which has been very irritating, I can tell you. They started knocking just as I was recording something this morning. I've got another podcast to record for tomorrow, for Sunday, rather. The In Conversation with this evening, and I'm hoping that they bloody well stop for that. It's going to drive me up the wall. I have a ginger and lemon drink for this evening. Audrey Forbes says new pulley. I don't know what that means. New pulley? I don't know what they're installing. Probably some pulley of some description. Who knows? Anyway, cheers, big ears. Oh, so, hello. Holly and Co asked how it's frosty here. The sky was tinged with pink. Oh, no, yeah. How's your tooth? Oh, yes, the tooth. I managed to sand it down a bit myself. I can't remember what I stuck in my mouth. Oh, a piece of wood. I have an old ruler. I managed to get that into my mouth and grind it just to take the edge off the sharpness. It did actually work. So that's all right. Mary and Philip. Good afternoon, Richard and Julia. Oh, yes, Mary. Oh, that's what you mean by pulley, a pullover. Ah, I'm with you. Sorry, I was thinking about them. Yes, I have a new tank top, ladies and gentlemen. It's just arrived. Here it is. It's a bit chilly in here to not wear my jacket, but it's a new tank top. Very lovely. Checks in the post, by the way, Mary. Checks in the post. Thank you very much. She also knitted a smaller one, which I couldn't get into, so we're going to give it to Joe because it's Diddy. It's in the other room. I can't show it to you. I should have brought it through, but yes, it's a bit chilly, so I just put my jacket back on if that's all the same. There we go. Oops. Anyway, how are we doing? We're just at 4 o'clock here in the UK. It might be a different time where you are, but don't let that bother you. We will commence our reading. Can't remember where we got to now at the end of this chapter. Hopefully I won't be too... This noise has just been driving me absolutely mad. I know they've only recently moved in, and I know they're doing their thing, so, I'm sure they'll be as quiet as gold. I probably make more noise in the long run with the shows and stuff that I do here, so I haven't whizzed over to complain. Anyway. Oh yeah, Julia's seen the jumper because I sent a picture to her. If it helps, both neighbours have builders in either side of me, says TurboStream. Oh, there we go. Lemon and ginger. That makes a change. Yeah, ginger and lemon. Yes, I like to change things around a bit. It makes all the difference. Crikey, makes all the difference which way you put. You can put the lemon in, then hot water, then the ginger. You can put hot water in and put the ginger and lemon in. You can put the hot water and put the lemon and ginger in. You can put the water in and then the cup. That's not so good. There's many different ways. Looking forward to our reading, says Ronald Tripp. Yeah, I better get on with it then. Anyway, here we are. Crikey. Right. Let me just adjust my glasses and adjust my glass eye. Whitsuntide has fallen early this year, and that seems to me always the fittest thing. Let me get a bit closer to the microphone so you can't hear all that other nonsense. It should come as it has come now, at the full fair tide of the spring, when the apple blossom, last ebullition of the year's youth, is at the zenith of its glory, and summer is still only a promise yet to be fulfilled. Whitsunday in Windlecombe, to all average folk at least, excels in importance every other day of the year, Christmas Day alone excepted. There is neither man, woman, nor child in the parish with the ability to get to church, but arrives... What do you mean? There is neither man, woman, nor child in the parish with the ability to get to church, but arrives there somehow and sometime during the day. For the old vicar, from his early communion service to the time he gives the benediction at close of evensong, it is a day of ceaseless action and exaltation. Every Whitsunday, when in fulfilment of an ancient compact between us, I go to the vicarage to share the last light of the day with him alone. I find him sitting in the little summer house at the foot of the garden, radiant, happy, yet tired as a navigator and hoarse as a crow. What befalls the curate at this end of his arduous day, no one knows. He is never visible after the final service. But Miss Sweet is said to pervade the neighbourhood of his lodgings like an unquiet ghost far into the twilight, waylaying his housekeeper with offers of night socks and eau de cologne. It's interesting because it gives the impression that he doesn't go to church and he avoids it like the plague from what I've read so far. I don't know if that's the impression you've got. And yet we know that he becomes the reverend. And also, I should share with you some photos that Paul Holmes very kindly sent in. I don't know if Paul is out there watching live or watching after the event, but he sent in, he made a little collection of pictures, and here they are of Tickner Edwards. We've got Tickner Edwards in the classic. I can't. Can I zoom in on that? There's no zooming in on this facility. I believe that's where he lived. I don't know if that's in Burpham, but that is, I understand, where he lives. There is a drawing of him, Monsieur Edwards, looking very noble in that picture. There is a postcard from him that says, "Many thanks for kind appreciation letter. Thank you for the companion volume to Neighbourhood. Lift luck on southern roads. Shall be pleased to see you when you are this way again. Tickner Edwards." That was 1923 from Burpham. There's a cover of Neighbourhood. The Law of the Honeybee, which was another of his books. Lift luck on southern roads, we read. With the Royal Medical Corps in Egypt, he apparently wrote. The Bee Master of Warrillow, which would be interesting. And there's a photo of him on the set, I think, of Tansy, with the girl who played Tansy, which he wrote. And that's where he was buried. And I've been to the church at Burpham. And there's a little bit of blurb about Tickner Edwards. It's been claimed that Mr. Tickner Edwards has done for Sussex much what Hardy has done for Wessex. This bold statement is not without justification, for Mr. Edwards has a special talent for observing and reproducing the outward semblance and the customs of the county where he has lived for many years. His novel resolves itself into a delightful eclogue of the sheep farmer's life. And anyway, it goes on and so on and such forth, which is all quite jolly. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. Thank you very much to Paul for sending that in, Paul Holmes. I will continue. Anne H, hello. I love the colour of your tank top. Thank you very much. It's a lovely colour. I suit burgundy. I'm going to ask Mary to make me a yellow one soon. Not this second. You've got to concentrate, Mary. I don't want you doing any knitting whilst you're listening. Sensible Paul says, I have an 18-year-old who likes loud music. The walls feel like vibrating sometimes. Yes, I bet they do. I'm still waiting for mine to go. 26. The painting is in Brighton and Hove Art Gallery, says Edward Moulding. Oh, fair enough. That's interesting. Apparently, Tickner refers to crossroads. He refers to a. Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about the TV series then. I don't think that was going. Crossroads. Bow, 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 bow. Anyway. On this fine Whit Sunday morning, I got to my corner in the grey old church earlier than my wont, before, indeed, the bell began its measured tolling. The school children were in their places in the south aisle, a whispering, nudging crew. The curate flitted about the chancel in his long black cassock, like a bat disturbed from its dreams. The little organist sat at her harmonium. No one else as yet had come into the church. I take it back, he's actually gone into church, so that's okay. It was good to sit thus in the cool and quiet before the service began, letting the heart go back over the other Whitsuntides that I had spent in Windlecombe, and letting the eye rove here and there through the hollow, sun-barred twilight of the old place, comparing the garlands that beautified it now with those that, in former years, had registered the attained prosperity of the season. For though wherever you looked, from the window ledges of the sanctuary to the multi-centred arch of the west door, there were flowers and greenery in profusion. No garden blossom shone against them. They were all wild flowers. Every child, most of the women and many of the men, could spare an hour's work from the day before, and had been busy in the woods and fields to make this house beautiful. The old vicar's ambition was known to us all, that in the church today every wild Maytide blossom should have its place. I looked hither and thither, but could think of none that was missing. The altar was golden with cowslips, primroses, buttercups, every flower that bore the colour of gold. Bluebells hid the oak carving of the pulpit, and with them others that were blue or purple, violet or veronica, forget-me-not or pimpernel. On all the window ledges, not to vie with the richness of the painted glass, white flowers alone were assembled. Cheval, I don't know, how do you pronounce this? Chervil, is it? Chervil or Chevil? Whatever it is, it's some flower. Chervil. Let's not have Levi again. Chevil and elder, daisies. Chevil and elder, daisies that are snow white in the mass. Sprays of silver stitchwort, wreaths of hawthorn entwining all. The chancel screen was hung with festoons of pink, herb robert and dead nettle, and the steps beneath it flanked with those wild growths that bear greenish flowers as well as green leaves, the wood spurge and the parlour green of arum and bryony. No colour was crowded unthinkingly upon another, each blossom held by its kinsfolk of a like complexion, and a dozen each blossom held by its kinsfolk of a like complexion, and 100 forms of shades of verdure underflowered them all. Gladly I marked that there was no roses Gladly I marked that there were no roses anywhere. Will you please stop? Gladly I marked that there were no roses anywhere, and this it was that gave the day its special meaning. Last year I remember how the wild dog rose lorded over everything, making Whitsun a summer feast, which it should never be. But this year we are weeks in front of the roses, and the May is scarce half blown. Now the bell commenced its slow rhythmic chime, and in the south porch, where the surplices hung, the choir boys began to assemble. The west door stood open, and mingling with the songs of birds and the joyous note of the wind in the trees, footsteps sounded on the church path. At first they came singly, then in twos and threes. After a while their shuffling note became continuous and the church began to fill on all sides. I could only look about. I could no longer look about me, but must sit straight in my pew, contenting myself with rare side glances. I heard the stump of old Tom Clemmer's crutches afar off in the street, heard it grow louder gradually and nearer until it ceased on the floor of the pew behind me, and Clemmer set himself to subdue the hurricane of his breath. Mrs. Runridge fluttered up the aisle with the tall old ferryman so close behind her, and his head so decorously lowered that he seemed to be regaling himself with the smell of roses in her bonnet as they went. Farmer Coles and his retinue arrived, blocking the aisle for a minute, until hot and flurried Mrs. Coles, by much pointing and nudging and a hubbub of whispered directions, had succeeded in packing all her family into the two great pews. With astonishing suddenness, the erstwhile empty church had become a crowded building. All Windlecombe was there, every woman or girl in her new Whitsuntide bonnet and gay new cotton frock. Ed says, we hardly hear the noises in the background and your voice is much louder. In fact, I'd never have noticed the noises if you hadn't mentioned it. Yes, the trouble is, I can hear it and it's very disturbing. I'm also getting the vibrations, you see, like that. So although you may not be able to hear it, it's bloody disturbing to me, I can tell you. Anyway, we will press on. Oh. It stopped. With astonishing suddenness, the erstwhile empty church... Oh, I've read all that. And now the bell stopped. A few late stragglers came hurrying up the path and into the rustling silence of the church with but half-restrained momentum. Sorry, that was very irritating, the comma in where it was, because it made me think of a different sentence. And now the bell stopped. A few late stragglers came hurrying up the path and into the rustling silence of the church with but half-restrained momentum. A sonorous amen came from the south perch. A little harmonium uplifted its voice afar off in the chancel. The white-robed cloisters began to pour up the nave, singing as they went. The curate followed, and at last of all, the old vicar, as upright as any, with his sure, unfaltering stride. No stranger, seeing him keep his true centre of the way, no stranger, seeing him keep the true centre of the way and pass unhesitatingly to his desk in the chancel, would have dreamed that he walked in almost utter darkness. Nor when he faced about and began the service with the deep-toned, serene voice of his, did any of us believe, though we all had known him all our lives. Not a word halted, not a word went awry, but only when the time for the Bible lessons came did he give the place to his helper. And even at these times we were not always delivered over to the sad-voiced, diffident curate. How much of the Bible he knew by heart, not even he himself could say, but often he would come down to the lectern and, with a face of inspiration, turn upon us, recite the whole lesson as though he wrote it ages back. Recite the whole lesson as though he wrote it ages back stood. But often he would come down the lectern with a face of inspiration turned upon us, recite the whole lesson as though he who wrote it ages back stood whispering at his side. Many a time, as he eased and turned back to his chancel seat with unerring step, and every man... Many a time, as he ceased and turned back to his chancel seat with unerring step, and every man fetched his breath in silence. I'm having another of those days. Many a time, as he ceased and turned back to his chancel seat with unerring step, and every man fetched his breath in the silence, I have marvelled at the force of habit that, when all hearts were inwardly exclaiming, could hold us mute of voice. The same thought came to me when, a little later, he stood in the pulpit, his deep tones rumbling in the rafters over our heads, and most of all, it pressed itself upon me when, at the close of the long service, I began him afar off in the radiant flower garden of the sanctuary, a towering white figure with arm uplifted, nebulous, uncertain in the multitudinous lights. But with the thought came always a kind of fear, a sensation that we were all living recklessly outside our defences, going our ways like children sheltered, aided and irresponsible. What would happen to Windlecombe and to us all when the strong arm failed and the voice no longer guided? At these times my comfort was always in a word of Susan Angel's, spoken with a cheery, quiet conviction from behind her rows of sweet-stuff bottles and knick-knack trays, when her young, almost girlish eyes shining out of her crabbed ancient face, she pointed a knitting needle at me for emphasis. "Depend on it, my dear," she said, "it won't go far, and then it call comes. Him as is christened and married and buried well all in the place, and been more than a father to us. And what'n been doing alone up there in the skies? Nah, man o' spirit. He belongs to Windlecombe. He's a treasure, he be, and here he'll abide. And some are the words which I can't possibly get out because it's too confusing to read it on the fly. Know what I mean, brother? I heard a weird tom-tom somewhere in the village today, and going forth, soon tracked the sound down to the cobbler's bleak garden that lay at the end of the green. The old man was ringing his bees. Through a gap in the hawthorn hedge, I could see him standing under his apple trees, surrounded by the hives, and beating on a saucepan with a door key, while the air above was alive with flashing wings and resonant with the high, shrill music of the swarm. This was the first swarm of the season, although it was well on in May. Most of the Windlecombe folk kept a few hives in some odd nook or other in the garden, and these were nearly all of the ancient straw pattern. He who could get the earliest swarm was accounted at once the luckiest and most astute of beemen, and the old cobbler's face glowed with pride through its encircling fringe of ragged white hair and whisker as he pounded away with his key, never doubting for a moment that the noise would soon induce the swarm to settle. There's a picture here, presumably, of the bee master, which I shall show you now, using special magic powers. I don't know how much of that you can see, but there he is. Can't get any closer, I'm afraid. But the bees were in no hurry to end this one mad frolic of their laborious lives. They rose higher and higher into the blue air and sunshine, drifting to all parts of the compass in turn. They veered out far over the roadway, swept back towards the cottage, hovering a while like a grey cloud over the chimney tops, took an indecisive turn round the next garden, reappeared in their old station above the orchard, and, as little inclined as ever, apparently, to make a permanent halt. And all the time their high tremulous music burdened the air. Every dog in the village barked, every goose quacked its sympathy, and the old cobbler beat steadily on the pan. I got my elbows comfortably into the gap in the hedgerow, the better to enjoy the scene. The garden was completely surrounded by the hawthorn hedge, a glowing wreath of white, against which shone masses of blooming lilac and laburnum and grey and red garden may. The little cottage at the back of the shop stood up to its window sills in bright colour, every old-fashioned flower crowding about it. The winding red-tiled paths ran between borders of the same rich living hues. And beyond, in the orchard, splashed over with blue-white shadows and quivering gold as the sunshine filtered through the leaves, were innumerable hives, old-fashioned skeps of straw, each with its little chanting company of bees. The old cobbler spied me in the hedgerow gap and beckoned me to join him. He was without hat or coat and wore his leather apron. A half-mended boot thrown down on the path showed how hastily he had been summoned from work. As I came up, he managed somehow to extract from the saucepan an exultant, almost jeering tune. "Aha!" cried he, blinking up at his whirligig property. "Can ye show thee like o' that'n? You as keeps bees in pattern machines? None like straw there be, as I allers tell ye. These year new-fangled boxes, you never had a swarm this side of Corp Christian. I'll lay a pot o' 6. It wanted still 4 or 5 days to the date of the great Roman festival of Corpus Christi in Staversham, which annually drew all village sightseers from far and near. I reflected sadly, and rather shamefacedly, that not only was a swarm from my modern, roomy frame hives little to be expected during that interval, but that it was the last thing I had hitherto desired. Working at home among my trim, up-to-date hives, with all the latest scientific methods in apiculture at my fingertips, it seemed a fine thing to possess bees that had almost forgotten how to swarm, and that could bring me in a double or treble harvest of honey. But here, in the beautiful old bee garden, I began dimly to perceive another side to the argument. Whether courage or ignorance had led him to resist the tide of progress in beekeeping that has all but engulfed this gentlest, most picturesque of village crafts, the old cobbler might be right after all. My honey was better and more abundant than his, but it might well be dear at the price. The swarm was coming lower now, and the wildly flying bees closing their ranks. Above our heads, the air grew dark with them. It was plain that they would soon be settling. Of a sudden, the clanging key music ceased. Bleak pointed triumphantly to a bough in the tree bark. Is Bleak his name? A little knot of bees had fastened there, no bigger than a clenched fist. But as I looked, it doubled its size with every moment. From all the regions of sunny air above us, the bees thronged towards the cluster. In the short 5 minutes, hardly one remained on the wing, and in place of the wild trek song, a dull, uncanny silence held the air. From the drooping apple bough, the whole multitude hung together in a dark brown mass, looking strangely like a huge cigar as it swayed idly to and fro in the gentle breeze. And now the old cobbler went about the work of hiving the swarm in the old way, punctiliously observing all the traditional rites of the craft. A jar of ale was brought out, from which we must both drink to sweeten our breath for the coming ceremony. Then, having washed his hands, Bleak set about the dressing of the hive. It was a new skep, one of many that he himself had made during the long winter evenings bygone. He gathered first a handful of mint and balm and lavender, and with this he carefully scrubbed out the skep. Then he made a syrup of brown sugar and beer, wherein he gave the hive a second thorough dressing. Finally, having cut 2 or 3 leafy boughs of elder, he took the skep with its baseboard under his arm and approached the swarm on tiptoe and with bated breath. The bees hung in the sunshine, as silent and as inert as ever, except that a dozen or so were hovering above the cluster, humming a drowsy song. The note contrasted oddly with the wild merry music of the flying swarm, when all had seemed mad with excitement, as though they were setting forth on some fierce neck-or-nothing adventure, instead of a rather tame business in which they were at present absorbed. The old beeman stepped warily towards them, and holding the skep mouth upwards beneath the cluster, gave the branch a vigorous shake. Like so many black currants, the entire mass of the bees rattled down into the hive, when the baseboard was swiftly clapped over them, and the whole inverted and placed upon the ground. Waiting a minute or two, the old man then gently raised one edge of the skep and propped it up with a stone. A few hundred bees came tumbling out with a sound like a boiling over of a cauldron, but the greater part of the swarm remained within the hive. Before half an hour had passed, they had completely accepted the situation, and the worker bees were lancing busily off in all directions in search of provender for the new home. The old cobbler's prediction that I should have no swarm by Corpus Christi fell true enough. Every day I watched until the hours for swarming had passed by eventlessly, and then, on the great Stavisham feast day, in the sunny calm of afternoon, I followed the straggling line of sightseers by the riverway to the town. So can somebody explain to me why the bees are swarming, where they've come from to swarm? I understand that he's got the bees in his new hive, but where were the bees before the new? Were they in a different hive? Or has he just thrown them out the hive, waited for them to come out of the hive so he could clean the hive, and then they've come back in the hive? Is that what happened? I'm not really quite sure. Catching a few moments while waiting for the delivery. 100 lines, Dudley. I mustn't be late for the reading. Yeah, sorry about I did started off very badly. It's just sometimes it's just very difficult. Anyway, how are we doing? A hush is over the little precipitous market town. The hot May sun beats down on the waiting lines of people, on the fragrant linden trees, shading the quiet street, on the fluttering banners and pennants everywhere. The air is full of dim sound, wild drift or far-off bell music, the deep hum and stir of the expectant people, the voice of the wind, sweet and low, in the green lime labyrinth overhead. Every glance is turned up the street, where the church of St. Francis of Issy Assisi, or whatever his name is, lifts its bluff sandstone tower against the blue. Assisi, is it? Assisi? Francis of Assisi. Not Francis of Assisi. You're Francis of Assisi, aren't you? The great west door stands open. Straining the eye, the nearest watchers can just make out a glint of altar lights through the cavernous dark within, the rich, uncertain glow of candles given back from 1,000 gleaming points of silver chalice and gold cross and glittering filigree. And now the last rumbling harmony of the organ dies away. For a moment a deeper silence than ever fills... That's not even a sentence. For a moment, a deeper silence than ever... Oh, I see. For a moment, a deeper silence than ever fills the Gothic gloom. Then, the thin, fine note of a clarinet lifts up its trembling signal in the darkness. The brazen trombones join in with their passionate, deep-voiced music. The lights begin to move and dance, growing nearer and stronger. They're coming! To the remotest end of the waiting line, the whisper spreads. They're coming! Slowly, the procession winds its way through the great church door and down the precipitous street. First, the gilded, jewelled, encumbered cross, borne aloft by a young priest in a black cassock and snowy, deep-laced surplice. Then, the singing multitudes of schoolgirls, all in white, with wreath-crowned veils like so many Lilliputian brides. Now the boys from the convent seminary in crimson shoulder sashes, with their fussing marshals, their elder women after in their doleful, decorous black. Banners swaying, rainbows, streamers flying, and the shrill, chill child voices blent with the sound of the wind in the glad green leaves overhead. Now the trumpets and clarinets have turned the bend in the street. The singing gives way to deeper music. The banners come flinging and flaunting into the sunny vista. The gay procession takes on a darker tinge. Sisters in black, sisters in brown, sisters in grey, weary faces, sad faces, comely faces, winter and glowing, spring and ripe, calm autumn, all in the same cold livery of sorrow, all with the like abandonment to destiny so plainly fettering the innate unrule of will. The musicians pass on, the deep blurring melody fades, the pageant changes. Monks and friars now. The old Capuchin father totters by in his rough brown frock, carrying candle on a brazen stick. After him, a score of his own degree, all bearing lights that glimmer and blink superfluously in the sunshine, and all chanting a low, slow antipathon in a minor key. Old men reeking of the cloister, bent nearly double with their weight of years. Sturdy young friars, ruddy-jowled, tonsured, with only half an eye to their book. Suave-faced, grey-haired superiors, eyes in the sky, calm, transfigured, the vanquished world behind every man's broad back. And now a weird dirge-like note creeps down the sun-bathed street, and a murmur follows it through the craning, nudging crowd. The end, the crown of the pageant, is suddenly in view. It is all shining celestial white now, as the choristers sweep slowly by in their spotless lawn and lace, chanting their pseudo-requiem as they move. Behind them a bevy of major priests, of comfortable figure, gorgeously caparisoned. Little scarlet-robed acolytes walking backwards and strewing the way with rich-hued flowers, swinging the censers, vouchsafing their hallow of dim smoke upon the common air. And then, at last, under the great square baldacchino, the old Roman bishop himself, holding aloft the precious monstrance, like a glittering captive star. A vision now of billowing white and gold, and the low, sad chant swelling, falling, and the languorous fragrance of the incest and the trampled flowers. Wrapped to the eyes in his heavy, gilt-encrusted cope, the old priest gasped. Oh God, I'm so sorry. This is so difficult to read. Wrapped to the eyes in his heavy gilt-crusted cope, the old priest grasps his cherished burden with all the little might of his trembling blue-veined hands. His eyes on the gold-rayed treasure casket, held but an inch or two beyond his flushed, illuminated face. A trance-like stupor seems to be upon him as he moves, guided on either side by those other two, almost as splendidly robed as himself, who keep a grip on the fringe of his silken coat and lead him onward in his passionate ecstasy, treading thin air, enwrapped, magnificent, with otherworldly light. It is all over now. The great canopy has moved on, its bearers keeping ceremonious step and step. More richly accoutered priests follow in a holy rear guard. Then the crowd closes up eagerly behind and surges after them, bareheaded, jostling together, catching now and again a phrase of the mournful melody and giving it an echo that sobs away into silence far in the sunny length of the street. As I stand apart here in the deep shadow of the convent wall, the thronging multitude sweeps by, growing thinner with every moment. The gleaming star of the monstrance stands back a last clear flash of sunlight as it turns the distant foot of the hill. Soon the straggling human fringe of the procession vanishes it. A debris of blossom litters along the deserted way. Flags and streamers wave their bright hues over the dusty solitude. The street is forsaken, quiet again, save for the bells in the upper air and the wind in the trees. Please God be the end of the chapter. Yes. Oh my God. I'm going to end it early today, I'm afraid, because I really am struggling again. 40 minutes of descriptive stuff is mind-bogglingly difficult. The possession sounded positively continental, says Lee Lawson. But where are they getting all these people from? These old priests and all of this 100 years ago? You know, it did, as you say, it sounded like it was like coming out of... Oh, for Christ's sake, will you please shut up? Sorry, I'm being driven to distraction here. It sounded like they were coming out of, where the, what's his name lives? The Pope. What's it called? The place where the Pope lives? With all the popery people, the potpourris, and the white and blue smoke that comes, the black and... Anyway, apparently David Lammy thought the black smoke coming out when they were choosing the Pope was racist. Put that in your pipe. Put that in your Pope and smoke it. Lollipopes, get your lollipopes here. Popecorn, get your popecorn here. I can't remember the name of the place. Take a deep breath. Lovely reading. No, I feel this is so difficult to listen to. It's difficult. I can't bear it. I can't bear that it's so difficult for me to read it. We need somebody who can actually read rather than me. It is a tough read. Plus, the neighbours don't help. No, the neighbours are certainly not helping. But some days I'm better at it. I haven't. I really kind of need to reread the chapter, and it's one of those books that if you can read it in advance, read and record, you can get the nuance of every sentence, because I feel cheating because I often don't get the nuance right because I'm reading it on the fly and I don't always know where he's going with his blue-veined this and his, hyphenated descriptive words which just bombard me one after the other with no relief. The swine. Anyway, the Vatican, thank you, that's what I meant. Yeah, it sounded like the Vatican was out on day release. That procession with all these people. Can that be in an English little village down the road at Stanislav, wherever it was? Oh dear. Anyway, I'm going to go and I've got to go and do a recording later on. So when it works, it's okay. When it doesn't work, it's atrocious, and I just feel so bad. I do feel bad that I almost don't want to do it anymore because if I can't make it good, I just feel what's the point. But anyway, I'm going to finish off because I feel a bit low now. I will catch up with you tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching, and take it easy. Have a good rest of the afternoon, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.